Put your seatbelts on and get ready for the ride. We're the freaking New York Jets, so we're built for this shit.
Hello and welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Wednesday, October 8th. Hopefully everybody's having a good day so far today. This is episode 639 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me. For those tuning in on YouTube, make sure to please like and subscribe. Of course, appreciate all of those tuning in on all the different audio podcast platforms. And today we've got some New York Jets news and notes to discuss as the team is in London getting ready for their Week 6 matchup against the Denver Broncos. 9:30 Eastern, early morning football on Sunday for the New York Jets as Aaron Glenn and this team continue to look for their first win of the 2025 season, as they are the only winless team in the NFL. Obviously have not shown any real ability to pick up a win on American soil. So maybe this weekend, being in London, they pick up a win across the pond on Sunday morning. We will see. Obviously, I'll have my full preview pod up Saturday before that one on Sunday. But in today's episode, kind of just wanted to break down some of the latest news and notes around the team. There was some reports that have come out over the last couple days around a potential New York Jets fire sale at the trade deadline, some pieces that could be moved. So I wanted to open up today's podcast by discussing that potential trade deadline moves for the New York Jets, who potentially could be dealt, who actually has value on this team. We'll break that down to open up today's episode. And then I also want to dive into Aaron Glenn, his press conference earlier today, defending a common Jets, Justin Fields, and this offense, criticism, perception, however you want to phrase it, around this New York Jets team when you look at this offense, specifically in regards to garbage time. Glenn had some comments. I want to react to those comments and really discuss what this team has done in garbage time and the fact that they are a garbage time team on the offensive side of the football. So we'll dive into that a little bit later on. But before we get into that, I wanted to start today with some rumors and reports that have come out over the last couple of days about the New York Jets and potential moves and a potential selling at the deadline for this team. Obviously, the only 0-5 team right now in the NFL. It's been a complete disaster of a season. 4 of these 5 games have been non-competitive. We all know what has taken place so far in the first 5 weeks as the team gets set to take on the Broncos Sunday morning. And we're getting closer and closer to the deadline. We're about a month away from the trade deadline, a little less than that, actually. Tuesday, November 4th, 4 p.m. Eastern is the deadline. When you look at how that falls into the Jets schedule, that'll be coming off their Week 9 bye week before their Week 10 matchup against the Cleveland Browns. So in reality, the New York Jets only have 3 games left before the deadline, because the deadline falls on the week that they come off of their bye week in week number 9. So very quickly here, we could potentially be watching some of the final games for certain players in a Jets uniform. And Ralph Acciano of Fox Sports had an article written the other day talking to an anonymous NFL executive on some teams that they believe could potentially be sellers at the deadline. And this is what an anonymous NFL executive had to say about the Jets and the deadline. We'll throw it up here on the screen for the YouTube audience. Quote, "And the Jets are loaded with too many of ex-general manager Joe Douglas's players. New GM Darren Mucci and head coach Aaron Glenn are going to want to purge that organization and rebuild it with their guys. They look like a mess right now, so I think they'd be open to trading with almost anybody." This shouldn't come as much of a surprise. Before we dive into who could get traded, and there are some players, one player particularly, that is very obvious when talking about the trade deadline. But before that, this shouldn't come as much of a surprise. We went into this season with the New York Jets and said, if this team 8 games in before the deadline is 2-6, 1-7, you're probably looking at trading off some pieces. That's the case with every single team, but especially this Jets team. If you're 2-6, 1-7, 0-8, and the team looks bad, and you have certain players that you feel like won't fit this culture that Aaron Glenn is trying to build, although right now it has just been a culture of losing, which has been the culture that's been here now for 14 straight seasons. It's the same football we have watched this team play for the better part of the last decade plus now with this Jets team. Nothing seems to be changing, but that was the expectation. And as they sit 0-5, the expectation should be they're going to trade off pieces. There is a serious possibility that the New York Jets are 0-8 by week number 9. That's not just putting that out there because they've been so bad. That's the reality. Denver is tough. And even though Carolina and Cincinnati might look like winnable games, at the end of the day, the Jets are the only team that hasn't won a game this season. So they are the worst team in football. They could lose to anybody right now. And you can guarantee everybody's looking at the Jets as a get-right game. That's just the reality. That's where this sad franchise is at. Not to rant and go down that rabbit hole again, because we all know where the Jets are at. That's why this all adds up, and this shouldn't come as much of a surprise that they're potentially selling. Now, in terms of some players that they could deal, there's one obvious one, and that is Breece Hall. And similar to what we talked about before the season about being sellers at the deadline, and if you're 2-6, 1-7, right? If they were 3-5 or even 4-4, or somehow, some way they were 5-3 and exceeding everybody's expectations, you're obviously not selling. But Breece Hall's popped up a ton, and really Breece Hall's name has been in trade conversations with the New York Jets for really all offseason. And here we are again, things starting to ramp back up again when you talk about Breece Hall and his future with the team. You go back all the way to the owners' meetings when Aaron Glenn talked about the Jets' backfield as a committee approach and gave a lot of credit to Braylon Allen and a lot of credit to Isaiah Davis, talking about how they were going to use those guys a lot this season. And a lot of Jet fans, kind of the NFL world, kind of took those quotes and it essentially turned them into Breece Hall trade rumors. It was more so the outside than actually internally that the Jets were really looking to trade Breece Hall. I never bought into the whole Breece Hall trade rumors during the offseason. That was never going to happen. But certainly, we talked about it during the offseason that if this team got off to a slow start and they were sellers at the deadline, more likely than not, this team is not going to extend Breece Hall after this season. So you trade him during the year to get some value back for him as opposed to letting him walk in the offseason for nothing. Because I think we all agreed that this was going to be Breece Hall's final year with the Jets. Even if he had a huge year, you didn't see him getting extended. That's just not something that I think you expect Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji to do. We'll probably never know because he probably won't be with the team here when we get to the middle part of November. But that's the obvious first one, is Breece Hall, who also has value. And you look around the league at some teams that have some needs at running back. The Chiefs are a team that's popped up as a potential trade suitor for Breece Hall. The Bears are a team that has popped up. You want to throw the Cardinals in the mix. Maybe they're another team that's been decimated at running back. You want to throw them in the conversation. They are in a little bit of a different spot, though, right, where they have struggled and just had a terrible loss against Tennessee. Are they really going to be in the mix in a couple weeks at the deadline to make a trade at that point? So that also throws into the mix. But there is going to be plenty of suitors for Breece Hall, and rightfully so. And even as much as you expect Breece Hall to get traded, and I think we really are watching, I would predict at this point Breece Hall does get traded. I think we are watching probably the final 3 games of Breece Hall in a Jet uniform. It'll still sting a bit just because he is a player that you drafted in the second round, never fully lived up to potential here. Feels like we'll never fully live up to potential here. Had the great start to 2022, tore the ACL, came back in 2023, had a solid year, really impressive season, but then you expected him to take another step in 2024. Didn't. A lot of that was the issues with the run game and the offensive line, just the whole mess that was last year. And now you enter into this season, he's done some good things, but then you look at last week, a 113-yard, 8.1 yard per carry performance with 42 yards as a receiver, a really nice game for him, gets thrown kind of under the radar because he fumbled in a really, really big spot. And that kind of diminished what he was able to do on the ground the rest of the day. So that's kind of the Breece Hall thing. He will probably, just like every other former Jet, will probably go to Kansas City, will probably go to another team and be great and win a Super Bowl and all that stuff, because that's always what happens. Breece Hall's the main one. In terms of the rest of it, though, you talk about the Jets having a fire sale. That part seems realistic, but you really start to then dive into which players are they actually going to trade, which players on this team actually hold value. And I've said it, the only untouchable for me, and this is a little unrealistic because they're not going to trade everybody, nor is everybody going to trade for every player on this Jets team. As a matter of fact, there's probably a lot of players on this Jets team that if the Jets release them, no team in the NFL would claim them. That's how bad parts of this roster is. Let's just tell like it is. That's why this whole, they're going to trade everybody does need a little bit of context, because is anybody really going to trade for Allen Lazard? You want to say, trade Michael Clemens? I would put a lot of money on if the Jets released Michael Clemens right now, there's probably not one NFL team out there that went in and picked him up. Brady McGregor. Nobody's going to trade for Brady McGregor. So there is parts of that. But the other two most realistic players, I think, is you have to throw Quinnen Williams in the mix as a potential player that gets traded. And him, similar to Breece Hall, is another one that has done some really good things as a Jet, more so than Breece Hall. But you look at the contract, you look at just the state of the team and the potential picks you could get back for Quinnen Williams with a team that could use him. I could see that being a reality where Quinnen does get traded. More surprising than Breece, but he's the name to keep an eye on. I would also throw Quincy Williams in the mix. Now, Quincy Williams, to me, would be even more so in the mix if he wasn't hurt. However, he is eligible to come back week 8, which is right before the bye week. So potentially you could get a world where Quincy becomes healthy and a team at the deadline wants him and the Jets end up dealing him. The timeline there could work because you're not going to trade somebody that nobody's going to take somebody that's injured or has a setback or whatever. If Quincy is healthy and he does come off the IR at the earliest point, which would be week number 8, that would open the door for potential trade where both brothers leave. Breece, Quinnen, Quincy are names to keep an eye on. Breece is in a tier of his own. He's pretty much a guarantee. You throw Quinnen in the mix, you throw Quincy in the mix. I don't think Sauce is going to get traded, nor is who's going to want to take on that contract with the way he's been playing. Is somebody going to want to take on the highest paid corner contract in football? And you look at the rest of the trade assets. Like I said, who really holds value? Andre Cisco is valuable. Nobody's going to take Andre Cisco. The Jets aren't going to trade Brandon Stevens, but who's going to take Brandon Stevens in that $36 million gross contract? I know he's been playing better, but nobody's going to take that. Nobody's going to take that contract, and nobody's probably going to want that player. Allen Lazard holds nothing. Josh Reynolds holds nothing. What, you going to get a haul back for Tyler Johnson? No, he holds nothing. Michael Clemens holds nothing. You're not going to trade the rookies, but the rookies, most of them hold nothing as well, especially the day 3 picks when you look at Kiko Maui-Noah, who's now hurt, and Tyler Barron, two of probably some of the worst players on this team. McGregor holds nothing. The rest of the offense, there's not much value there. There's a couple players, Membu, Garrett. Those are like the untouchables. And that's pretty much the untouchables on this whole team, really, that I would say. And I think most Jet fans would be in agreement. Like Stone Smart holds nothing. So there is that whole fire sale trade everybody. Yeah, but at the same time, teams are going to want those players. Teams are going to have to want those players. And who wants a lot of this Jets team? A lot of this Jets team is just bad. Like Tony Adams is not going to gain any interest. Oh, trade Tony Adams. No, nobody's going to want Tony Adams. So I think Breece Hall, Quinnen, Quincy are the big names to really keep an eye on if the Jets really want to start overhauling this thing. And you talk about sending a pretty big message, and you talk about really making big changes, trading Breece Hall, Quinnen Williams, and Quincy Williams, who are really anchors of this roster, some of the top players on this roster when they're at their best, that would be certainly selling off. But outside of that, it's tough to see the Jets just selling off a ton of pieces because there's really not much value on the rest of this roster that other teams are going to want. And that's just the reality. And if there is a world where they do trade Breece and they don't have Braylon, I mean, you're probably rolling with Isaiah Davis, Khalil Herbert the rest of the season, Kene Nwangu maybe when he's healthy. So talk about the running back room going from, Breece and Braylon to Braylon being hurt because he was doing something that he shouldn't have been. And then Breece trade, now you're down to your running back 3 and 4 essentially. And a guy that you just picked up off the side of the street, Khalil Herbert. So lots of things can change here with this Jets roster. It looks ugly right now. You trade away some more pieces to gain assets, as they should. It could look uglier. And I think when you look at Breece Hall and a potential trade package for Breece Hall, I think you look at probably a 3rd, 4th round pick. Maybe you have to package Breece and let's say a 5th or a 6th to get a 4th or a 3rd back. You're not getting a 2nd. You're not getting a 1st. That's just way too unrealistic. You're not going to quite get the value that he was. He was a 2nd round pick. You're not getting a 2nd back. I bet you're probably realistically in the 4th round range for Breece Hall. Now, moving on to the comments made earlier today from Aaron Glenn as he met the media in London in his weekly Wednesday press conference. Wanted to dive into the comments and dive into been a kind of a hot topic around the Jets and NFL a little bit as well. Just Justin Fields' performance, the offense's performance, and the whole notion of Jets being garbage time merchants. Are they? Are they not? Is it true? Is it not true? You guys know where I kind of land on this, but I do want to throw Glenn's comments here into the conversation. He said earlier today, quote, "I understand from the outside that people want to say we're getting yards because teams are letting us. No, teams play in this league. Nobody wants to just give up yards. I do think we get into a situation where we start to get in a groove, and that's any quarterback. Justin has been getting in a groove in those situations. I have no issues with where we're at in the passing game." I disagree with a lot of that, and I think most Jet fans probably will disagree with a lot of that. We all know the common sense around garbage time. Team down by 2 to 3 scores. Defense, they don't purposely let up points. They don't give up, but they start to play softer. They start to, play a lot more soft coverage, let up a lot more yards, just kind of let the clock go, let the clock run down, let teams, they'll pick up yards, but, it's going to be a lot more keep them in bounds, keep the clock running, things like that. Play backed off, garbage times, late in games. Sometimes you'll see backups enter the game. We all know what that is. And the reality is stats back it up that Glenn can say all he wants about defense is still playing hard and defense is still doing what they do all game against the Jets in the 4th quarter, which we all know is false when we get to garbage time. And the numbers actually back that up. I want to bring up an example of the Tampa Bay game. In the first 3 quarters of the game, now you could skew this a little bit because it is Todd Bowles, and this is something that this is the Todd Bowles special, almost blowing games in the 4th quarter or blowing games in the 4th quarter, as we all know as Jet fans. But in that Buccaneers game, just to kind of show you the difference in defense, the first 3 quarters of the game, the Buccaneers blitzed Tyrod 63% of his dropbacks. You go to the 4th quarter, they blitzed him on just 23% of his dropbacks. That's a 40% difference. They almost cut the amount of blitzes that they had on Tyrod in half in the 4th quarter. I know this is more of a Justin Fields discussion, but just showing you that, yes, it is true. Defenses have backed off. Defenses play a lighter style. That's what every defense does when you get to the 3rd quarter and these games are completely out of hand like they've been. And you look at Tyrod in those games against Tampa Bay, or in that game against Tampa Bay, the first 3 quarters, he was 14 of 22 for 80 yards and a touchdown in 8 possessions. And that interception was a pick 6. Or I apologize, I think I said touchdown. 1 interception, that was a pick 6 in 8 possessions. You fast forward to the 4th quarter of that game where he was blitzed less than 25%. and 40% less than he was in the first 3 quarters. He completed 12 of 15. That was 80% of his passes for 117 yards and 2 touchdowns. And they had the miraculous Will McDonald blocked field goal, take it back. Jets ended up losing because the defense stinks. We all know how that game went. That's what it took, though. It took almost half the blitzes sent from the Tampa Bay, and still Will McDonald needed to make a heroic play, and they still lost the game. So, yes, they are just flat out, before we even dive into the numbers, they are garbage time merchants. That's who the New York Jets are this season. Now, when you look at Justin Fields overall, 71 of 106 this season through the air. That's 67% for 754 yards, 7.1 yards per attempt, 4 touchdowns, no picks, a 100.1 passer rating, and a 46.9 QBR. When you look at his rushing numbers, he's had 31 carries this season for 204 yards, 6.6 yards per carry, and 3 rushing touchdowns, and the 1 fumble against Buffalo. So on the year, he's had just 1 turnover, which was the fumble, 7 total touchdowns, no picks, and 958 yards. Overall, you look at those numbers and you say to yourself, he's probably, and you look at the numbers specifically over the 3 full games that he's played, 283 passing yards against Dallas, 2 touchdowns, 226 passing yards against Miami and a touchdown, and 218 passing yards against Pittsburgh and a touchdown. In that Pittsburgh game, he did actually play well, and it was not garbage time. But you look at those 3 games, and you say to yourself, the Jets probably at least have 2 wins right now. That's where the garbage time, though, comes in. That's where the asterisk to all of these numbers and the context to this discussion has to come in. When you look at, and I talked about this a little bit on Monday, but want to expand here. When you look at the score of the game in the last 4 games, Buffalo, Tampa, Miami, Dallas on Sunday, by when the Jets scored their first touchdown and when it happened in the game, it really tells you the whole story of this, a big part of this story. So against the Cowboys, the score was 30-6 in the 4th quarter when they scored. Down 24 points. 3+ scores, that's garbage time. Against Miami, down 2 scores, 17-3 in the 3rd quarter. Garbage time. Against Tampa, 23-6 in the 4th quarter. I mentioned the 40% less blitzes from Todd Bowles in that half, or in that quarter. Garbage time, down 17 points. 3 scores in that game. And forget about the Buffalo game. Down 30-3. 27 points in the 4th quarter before they scored and had that 1 good drive. And that was actually led by Tyrod, who threw the touchdown to Ruckert because Fields had the concussion. So in total, you add that up. In the last 4 games, when the Jets score their first touchdown, the combined score is 100-18. That's an 82-point difference. The Jets have combined been outscored by 82 points before they score their first touchdown. And they haven't scored a touchdown in the first half of these last 4 games. On average, when the Jets score their first touchdown, they are down 20 over the last 4 games. So the Jets, on average, to put it even in simple terms, are down 3 scores when they score their first touchdown. That is the literal definition of garbage time. Second half, down 3 scores. Game is over. Defenses have backed off. They're looking ahead to next week. And the Jets are just going downfield as the clock continues to run down and stat padding. Last week's a prime example, 37-22. That was not a 15-point game. 30-6 to open the quarter. They scored 16 in the quarter. Or I apologize. It was 30-6, and they put up 16 points in the 4th quarter. Same thing with Tampa. Same thing with Miami. Same thing with Buffalo. It's been ugly. They're on average down 20. That's garbage time. And you want to look at just as a whole this season, even including the Steelers game when they went into the 4th quarter with a 10-point lead, going into the 4th quarter this year, they've been combined trailed in games 114-52, which is a 62-point difference. So they've been outscored by 62 points in the first 3 quarters. So on average, the Jets go into the fourth quarter down 2 scores. Again, the literal definition of garbage time. Down 2 scores in the fourth quarter. Not a real chance to come back, specifically the Dallas game, Miami, Tampa, and of course, Buffalo. No real chance. It's terrible. That's where they start getting their points. And you look at Fields' numbers because, like I said, the whole numbers, and I don't want to just crush Fields, and I don't want to make it seem like I'm crushing Fields. To be honest, Fields hasn't had a bad year. Has he been great? No. Has he been terrible? No. He's kind of been in the middle. I think he's been probably what most Jet fans kind of in the area of where we kind of saw him, expected him to be in at the beginning of this season. He's had some good, he's had some bad. A lot of it has come late in games. But even you just remove the numbers with Fields. There has been some moments, whether it was Miami game where he has a tough time finding the mic. There was some miscommunication, some penalties. Has he been the biggest problem? No. But has he been necessarily a solution for the future? He also hasn't been that either. He's kind of been in the middle. So I don't want to make this seem like I'm crushing Fields. It's more so just the offense as a whole and this notion around this team that they are garbage time merchants, which is true. And I do also think the last couple of days there's been a lot of, oh, Justin Fields isn't the problem. And that's not false, but let's not act like all of these stats, these box score watchers, as I like to call them sometimes, it doesn't tell you the whole story. You look at Fields in the fourth quarter this season, this might be the biggest, most eye-popping stat of them all, because this tells you specifically Justin Fields. 29 of 44, which is 65.9% completion percentage, 248 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. 32% of his yards and 75% of his touchdowns have come in the fourth quarter this year. Only one other touchdown that he threw did not come in the fourth quarter. Other than that, 3 of the 4 of them have. And they've trailed in all those games. You look at last week against Dallas, another prime example. He went 16 to 22 in the fourth. That's 50% completion percentage. Or rather, that's a 72% 0.7% completion percentage. 132 yards and 2 touchdowns. 50% of his completions came in the fourth quarter. Think about that. 50% of his completions came in one quarter over what he did in the first 3 quarters of the game. The rest of the game, he went 16 to 24 passing, which was 66.6%. So even his completion percentage was over 70% in just the fourth quarter. Below 70% the rest of the game. 46.6% of his yards came in the fourth quarter against Dallas, and both of his touchdowns came in the fourth quarter as well. That's garbage time. That is garbage time. So the point to all of this is, it isn't something, just some notion from the outside as Glenn was talking about. That's not true. It's the true fact. You watch this team, the eye test tells you. You just are sitting there watching the games. The games are over in the second half. The games are over at halftime. Once this team hits adversity, the games are over. They're going to the fourth quarter. It's a blowout. There's nobody in that building. And that's when they're starting to score. That's just the reality. Stats back it up. Eye test back it up. And here's one more stat I'll throw out here. This is quarterbacks adjusted EPA per play when they have a win probability of 2 to 98%. Justin Fields is 27th. He's only better than Jake Browning, Joe Flacco, Cam Ward, Bryce Young, and Geno Smith. Not exactly great company to be in. And essentially what that stat means is when he has a chance to win, he's the 27th best quarterback. When he has less than a 2% chance to win, whether that's 1%, slightly less than 1%, he's a lot better than the 27th best quarterback in the NFL. Another stat to tell you, late in games, Jets are scoring points when they're down by a ton. They've been uncompetitive. They don't score touchdowns in their opening drive. It's always field goals, and it's always something bad that results them to kick a field goal, whether it's a penalty, whether it's a missed throw, maybe a questionable play call. There's been a couple different examples of Jets drives stalling in games to open up games that have resulted them to kick field goals. This team is not good enough to win by kicking field goals. Justin Fields is 0-6 in his career when the defense lets up more than 20 points. You're not going to win games by kicking field goals when this defense is letting up the amount of points that they are letting up. So that's my thoughts on the whole garbage time conversation and why it is true, and not to crush Fields or this offense, because there has been times where this offense has actually done some good things. There's been some flashes from the offense, unlike the defense where there's been nothing. There's been some positives from the offense. But all in all, it's all coming a lot of it's coming garbage time. And there's no defending that. There's no looking at it from the other way. That's just the reality. And if you watch the games, you know that. So that'll do it. Another episode in the books. Appreciate you all, as always. Let me know what you think in the comments section down below. What are your thoughts on the latest New York Jets news and notes? Your thoughts on a potential trade deadline fire sale? Thoughts on the Jets as garbage time merchants? And any other Jets takes, let me know down below. We'll be back. A lot more content coming your way. Appreciate you all as always. And until next time, JETS, 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 Jets.